scent of fresh paint still clung to the walls, and the soft glow from the lamps made everything feel warm and almost unreal. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that this was what security looked like, that I had finally walked into a future I could trust. My name is Elena Brooks. I am 28 years old, a high school literature teacher who has always preferred quiet predictability over unexpected turns. And for 6 months, I believed I had married a man who could not speak. His name is Gabriel Turner, a successful business owner who communicated with me through handwritten notes and gentle expressions. We shaped an entire relationship around silence. I thought that silence meant tenderness, understanding, and safety. But that night, after I set my wedding bouquet on the counter and turned toward him with a tired smile, Gabriel opened his mouth, and he spoke. His voice was steady, deep, and unmistakably real. "Elena, we need to talk." I stopped breathing. My mind scrambled to understand the sound I had just heard, but my heart understood before reason had a chance. Nothing about the man I had just promised my life to match the story I had been told. Not his past, not his quietness, not even the disability I had believed defined him. In a single moment, the foundation I had trusted began to crack beneath my feet. Before that moment, I truly believed I understood how I had ended up in this marriage. To explain what happened next, I need to go back to where everything began, back to the version of me who still trusted the people closest to her. I was raised by my mother, Marilyn Brooks, a woman shaped by loss and fear. My father passed away when I was 12, leaving her to navigate life alone with a small daughter and a mountain of bills. She carried that struggle like a permanent shadow, and over the years it hardened into a single belief: stability mattered more than anything, even love. By the time I turned 28, my mother had become convinced that I was running out of time. She often reminded me that life did not wait forever, and that good men were rare. When she introduced me to Gabriel Turner, she spoke about him as if he were a blessing delivered to our doorstep. A man with success, discipline, and a gentle demeanor. A man who, despite the challenges of being unable to speak, had built a thriving business and a respected reputation. I met Gabriel at a charity event my mother insisted I attend. He communicated by writing in a small notebook he carried everywhere. The first thing he wrote to me was a simple sentence: "You seem kind. I want to know more about you." There was something patient and sincere in the way he observed me as I read his words. I felt seen in a way I had not experienced in years. My mother encouraged the relationship from the start. She praised Gabriel's achievements and reminded me how rare it was to find someone who valued emotional connection more than empty conversation. I slowly let my guard down, convinced that his silence made our interactions more meaningful. I believed I had found someone who listened to understand, not just to reply. As the months passed, I grew attached to the quiet rhythm of our connection. We had dinners where I talked and he wrote brief responses. We took long walks where silence felt comfortable, not empty. I convinced myself that this was what maturity looked like, what a grounded adult relationship should feel like. When Gabriel proposed, it happened during a calm evening at a lakeside restaurant. He placed a ring on the table with a note that said, "I want to build a life with you." I said yes, partly because I cared for him, and partly because I wanted to make my mother proud. I trusted the picture of him she had painted. I trusted the version of our future she promised. I had no idea then how much of that picture was built on something other than truth. Our wedding day felt like a scene from someone else's life, as if I were playing a role my mother had written for me. The ceremony was held in a beautiful garden behind an old estate, with white chairs lined neatly in rows and soft music drifting through the air. Guests kept telling me how radiant I looked, how lucky I was, how perfect the match seemed. I smiled, but underneath the makeup and flowers, a quiet unease pulsed in my chest. Gabriel stood at the altar in a tailored navy suit, calm and composed. He didn't speak, of course, but he wrote a single message on a small card and handed it to me before the vows. "Thank you for choosing me." It softened the uncertainty I felt, and I convinced myself that doubt was normal. No one walked into marriage entirely fearless. The reception was large and elegant, arranged almost entirely by my mother. She moved through the room with pride, greeting relatives as though she had finally completed a lifelong mission. Gabriel stayed close to me, offering comforting smiles and light touches to my arm, gestures that reassured me he was present even without words. When the evening ended, we drove to the apartment we were supposed to share. It was a place I had only visited once, still smelling of new beginnings. I set my bouquet on the counter, feeling the weight of the day settle into my shoulders. I turned to Gabriel, ready to step into this new chapter, trusting that even if it was unconventional, it was still ours. He watched me for a long moment, and something in his eyes shifted. The gentleness I was used to was still there, but it was layered with something heavier, something I could not name. He took a breath, deeper than any I had seen him take before. Then he spoke. "Elena, we need to talk." The sound of his voice hit me harder than anything I had ever experienced. I stepped back, my mind scrambling. My body felt cold, as if the air had been stolen from the room. Every memory of our 6 months together replayed instantly, every silent dinner, every handwritten note, every moment I believed he had no voice. In a few seconds, the entire foundation of our marriage shifted. I stared at him, unable to form a word, while he looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. A man with a voice I was never supposed to hear. For several seconds I could not react. My thoughts scattered in every direction, but none of them could explain why the man I had just married, a man who claimed he could not speak, had spoken as clearly as anyone else. My pulse thudded in my ears. I tried to breathe, but every breath felt thin. Gabriel stepped toward me, but I raised a hand instinctively, stopping him where he stood. The silence stretched between us, heavier than all the quiet moments we had shared combined. "You can talk?" I finally whispered. He swallowed. "Yes, I can." The simplicity of his answer made the hurt sharper. I felt heat rising behind my eyes, but anger kept the tears from falling. I demanded to know how long he had pretended, why he had built an entire relationship on silence, and what kind of man could deceive someone in such an intimate way. Gabriel lowered his head before he began explaining. He told me everything started years earlier with his ex-wife, Sabrina Cole. Their marriage had fallen apart when she betrayed him, draining their accounts and leaving him drowning in legal battles. She walked away with a large share of what he had built, and the emotional toll left him hollow. He said he lost trust in words, in promises, in affection that came too easily. Words felt dangerous, so he stopped offering them. When he met me, he was terrified of repeating the same mistake. Pretending to be mute, he said, felt like a way to protect himself, a way to see if someone could care for him without being pulled in by charm or polished conversations. That was when the second blow came. He confessed that he had not carried out the plan alone. My mother, Marilyn, had known the truth from the beginning. She had encouraged him, convinced that silence would help me see his reliability and maturity without being distracted by charm. She told him I needed stability more than anything, that I was too sentimental, too trusting, too likely to choose the wrong man if left to my own instinct. The room tilted slightly. It felt like the walls were closing in. My own mother had helped create a lie that lasted 6 months, a lie that led me into a marriage built on half-truths and manipulation. I backed away until my shoulders touched the wall. I could not look at Gabriel anymore. I told him to leave. There was no yelling, no dramatic argument, just a quiet, trembling voice telling him I needed space to breathe. He nodded and walked out without another word. The moment he left, I sank to the floor, feeling the weight of betrayal pressed down from every angle. The man I married had lied to me. The woman who raised me had lied to me. The two people I trusted most had made decisions about my life without ever asking what I wanted. The next morning, my mother showed up at my door. I opened it with tears I could no longer hold back. She looked at me with concern, but all I could see was the person who had pushed me into a story she had written herself. "Why, Mom? Why would you be part of this?" Her expression shifted between guilt and stubborn conviction. She said she just wanted me to have a future that was safe, secure, predictable. She insisted that Gabriel was a good man, that his intentions were pure, that his silence kept the relationship slow and steady. She told me she had been afraid that without guidance, I would choose someone who would break my heart. Her words did not comfort me. They only widened the fracture. I told her she had crossed a line I was not sure could ever be repaired. After my mother left, the apartment felt unbearably still. I walked from room to room without purpose, unable to settle, unable to think clearly. Every object reminded me of something I no longer trusted. The framed pictures on the wall, the unopened wedding gifts, even the quiet hum of the refrigerator made the space feel foreign. It was as if my entire life had shifted an inch to the left, no longer fitting the way it used to. For the next few days, I avoided my phone. I could not bring myself to read Gabriel's messages or hear my mother's voice. I needed distance from both of them, space to figure out what parts of my life still belonged to me, and what parts had been shaped by other people's fears. I slept on the couch, barely eating, barely speaking. The silence that once felt peaceful now felt like a heavy weight pressing on my chest. My friend Jenna came over after hearing a broken message in my voicemail. She did not ask questions right away. She simply made tea, sat next to me, and waited until I was ready. When I finally told her everything, she listened with the patience only a true friend possessed. She looked at me and said, "Elena, this is the first time in your life that no one else is choosing for you. Do not rush. Do not decide out of fear. Decide out of clarity. What do you want your life to look like from this point forward?" Her words settled into my mind like something I had been waiting to hear for years. For the first time since the night of the wedding, I felt a spark of control returning. That evening, I finally picked up my phone and sent Gabriel a message. I told him that if he wanted me to understand his side, he needed to sit with me and tell the entire truth from beginning to end. No holding back, no protective omissions, no half explanations. We met at a small park where the benches faced a quiet lake. Gabriel looked exhausted, as if he had not slept either. He told me everything again, but this time he spoke with humility, no defenses, no excuses. He admitted that pretending to be mute had been wrong, that fear was not a justification, and that my mother's involvement had clouded his judgment even further. When he finished, I took a long breath and told him the only thing I was sure of. If we were going to continue in any way, we had to start from the beginning. No marriage, no titles, no assumptions. Two people getting to know each other truthfully. He agreed without hesitation, and for the first time I saw sincerity rather than silence in his eyes. We stood there, unsure of what the future would hold, but willing to start again, not as a husband and wife bound by lies, but as two strangers trying to rebuild something honest. Just when I thought things were slowly settling into something understandable, the past found its way back to us in the form of a woman named Sabrina Cole. I learned about her through Gabriel during our conversations in the park, but hearing details from him and experiencing her presence were two very different things. It started with a message request on my social media. Her profile picture showed a woman, with sharp features and confident eyes, the kind of person who walked into a room, expecting attention. The message was short: "I need to speak with Gabriel, tell him to answer his phone." When I didn't reply, the messages became more persistent. She sent screenshots of old photos of her and Gabriel together, smiling vacations, anniversary dinners, the life they once had. When I showed them to Gabriel, he closed his eyes for a moment before sighing. Sabrina was never one to let go easily, he explained. She thrived on control and manipulation, and even after their divorce, she reached out whenever her life spun out of balance. He said he would handle it. But handling it was not as simple as blocking a number. A week later, Sabrina appeared outside Gabriel's business. She demanded to speak with him, her voice loud enough for employees to hear. Word of the scene spread quickly, and by the time Gabriel told her to leave, half the staff had witnessed the confrontation. I saw the strain in his posture when he came to see me that evening. It was clear that her return unsettled him in ways he had hoped never to face again. Then came the second blow. Sabrina asked to meet both of us. She arrived looking exhausted and far less composed than in her messages. Her confidence had been replaced by something close to desperation. She revealed she was pregnant, not with Gabriel's child, but with someone who had already left her. She said she had no support, no means, and she needed help, any help Gabriel could give. Her request did not come with softness, it sounded more like a demand born from entitlement and panic. I watched Gabriel struggle with old guilt and responsibility, emotions left over from years of a complicated marriage. I told him quietly that helping someone did not require sacrificing our peace or hiding anything from me. If he chose to assist her, it all needed to be transparent, no secrets, no private messages, no closed doors that could reopen old wounds. He nodded, almost relieved that I had set the boundary before he had to ask for permission to cross it. He agreed to offer limited support, nothing more. When Sabrina realized there was no space left for manipulation, she left with a bitterness that felt familiar. For the first time since our wedding night, I felt we were acting like a team, not perfect, not healed, but aligned. Not long after Sabrina's departure, life shifted in a way I never expected. It began with small changes, things easy to overlook. I felt tired more often, my appetite swung unpredictably, and ordinary smells suddenly overwhelmed me. At first, I blamed stress. My mind had been stretched thin for weeks, and my body felt just as worn. But one early morning, as sunlight slipped through the blinds, a quiet realization settled over me. I sat on the edge of my bed with a hand pressed to my stomach, unable to ignore the truth any longer. Later that day, a test confirmed what my heart had already whispered. I was pregnant? I stared at the positive result for a long time, caught between disbelief and fear. A child was not part of the plan, not now, not while everything in my life felt so fragile. My eyes filled with tears, not from regret, but from the weight of what this meant. I was carrying a life created on a night overshadowed by lies. I wondered how anyone could build a future on ground that unstable. When I told Gabriel, he went silent in a way I had never seen. His eyes softened, and for a moment he looked overwhelmed, but not in fear. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for mine. Elena, I am here. For you and for this baby. Even if you choose not to stay with me, I will show up. Every day, I will not fail either of you. His voice cracked on the last words, and something in me shifted. This was not the man who hid behind silence or deception. This was someone truly trying to be better than the version of himself shaped by old wounds. The weeks that followed felt different. We did not rush back into romance. Instead, we rebuilt something slow and deliberate. We went to doctor appointments together, sitting in dim rooms listening to the tiny heartbeat that belonged to both of us. We took quiet walks after dinner, talking about fears and hopes we had never shared before. He helped paint the small room that would become the nursery, moving carefully as if every stroke of the brush was a promise. Little by little, the anger that had once filled every space between us began to loosen its grip. Healing did not arrive all at once. It came gently in small gestures, in honest conversations, in the simple act of showing up day after day. And with each passing moment, I felt something grow, not just the baby, but a fragile, cautious trust that maybe, despite everything, we were becoming a family. Our daughter arrived on a quiet morning in early spring. The world outside the hospital window looked soft and muted, as if it, too, held its breath for her first cry. When the nurse placed her in my arms, I felt the kind of peace that had eluded me for months. We named her Aria, a name that felt gentle and full of promise. Watching Gabriel hold her for the first time changed something in me. He looked down at her tiny face with a tenderness that did not need translation. No silence, no masks, no fear, just a man meeting his child for the first time, humbled by the weight of love. The months that followed were a blur of late nights, quiet feedings, and learning how to be parents together. There were moments when the past slipped into view, moments when doubt tried to return, but each day Gabriel continued to show who he was becoming instead of who he had been. He woke early to rock Aria back to sleep. He cooked when I was too tired. He apologized when old habits surfaced and corrected them without excuses. There was no performance in his actions, only sincerity. One afternoon, when Aria was 6 months old, Gabriel asked me to take a walk with him near the cliffs overlooking the ocean in San Diego. The sky was a soft shade of gold, and the breeze carried the scent of salt and blooming flowers. When we reached a quiet overlook, he turned to me with a simple expression. Elena, will you marry me again? This time with the truth. This time as equals. The ring he held was modest, nothing like the grand gesture from our first wedding. And that was exactly why I said yes. It reflected who we had become, two people choosing each other, not out of expectation or fear, but out of clarity. Our second ceremony was small, with just a handful of people who supported us through the hardest chapters. My mother apologized with her whole heart, promising to trust me to choose my own path from now on. I believed her, not because of her words, but because her actions finally aligned with them. As Gabriel and I exchanged vows again, this time with Aria in my arms, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. A life built not on silence or shadows, but on truth. Looking back now, it is difficult to believe how much my life has changed since the night my husband first spoke. There were moments when I thought everything was beyond repair, moments when the weight of betrayal felt too heavy to carry. But time has a way of revealing what is worth holding on to and what is meant to be released. What Gabriel and I built was not perfect, and it did not grow from a beautiful beginning. It grew from honesty earned the hard way. Trust rebuilt slowly, through days of showing up, through mistakes acknowledged, and through choices made with intention instead of fear. I learned that healing is not a single moment. It is a series of small decisions to keep trying, even when doubt whispers that it would be easier to walk away. I also learned that love cannot be protected by manipulation or shaped by someone else's expectations. My mother believed she was helping, but her choices taught me a lesson I carry with me. Everyday love rooted in control is not love at all. It is fear disguised as guidance. If there is one thing I want anyone listening to remember, it is this: you are allowed to start over. You are allowed to rebuild from the pieces of something that once hurt you, and you are allowed to choose a path that belongs entirely to you. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this story touched you in any way, I would love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to like, share, and leave a comment below. And if you want to hear more stories about resilience, family, and the complicated ways